My dad's friend has connections. Whenever my family runs into the slightest inconvenience, it's solved in a heartbeat. Mom was fired from her job, only to be promoted to a higher position hours later. Grandpa had terminal brain cancer and was miraculously cured within a week. It's almost like my family had their own personal fairy godmother. All Dad had to do was ring his friend Mike, who pulled strings that I never saw. I used to joke that if Mike ever died, his funeral would be attended by a mysterious man standing under a black umbrella. Dad said it was never that serious, though over the years I noticed Mike fixed all of our problems. My brother got into his dream college without even trying. He didn't even graduate high school, yet somehow got into Harvard thanks to Mike's connections. So, I chose not to even try in my first year of college, moving back home and getting a job at the mall. I wanted to be a photographer, not a doctor, which was what my father insisted on. Mike did get me into a prestigious medical school, but I was scared of blood. I told him multiple times I wouldn't be able to stomach it. Dad was pissed. Sure, but he didn't say anything, allowing me to stay for the summer to sort my thoughts out. He told me Mike could easily get me into another school abroad, but I kept telling him I didn't want to be a doctor. That was Dad's dream, not mine. I did ask if he could get his connections to find me a summer job in photography, but Dad was adamant that both of his children were going to medical school, which sucked. I understood Dad wanted us to be successful, but I hated blood. The idea of slicing into a human body made me nauseous. I mean, come on, I couldn't even handle horror movies. My brother was training to be a surgeon, somehow, which was weird, since just a year prior, he attempted to leave home with his girlfriend to pursue his passion. I hadn't spoken to him in a while, but Dex suddenly dropped his love for acting and dumped his girlfriend. He and Elena were engaged, and he just left her like that, like he never even loved her. I still remember the night before he ran away. Dex told me to do the same. There's something wrong with Mike, my brother told me, sitting on my bed. Dex had been suspicious of Mike since we were kids, and our father's friend had stopped us from getting sick. We had the stomach flu once during middle school and hadn't been sick since. Which was crazy, right? Mom didn't seem fazed, and Dad insisted we just had really good immune systems. Dex was convinced it was witchcraft. I was skeptical, leaning more towards Mike has connections. Suddenly, my brother was a completely different person. I knew siblings grew apart when they left for college, but this was on a whole other level. Dex never answered my texts or calls, and when he did, he was either studying in night classes or with his smart-ass friends. Growing up was a given, I knew that. But Dex became a stranger I couldn't stand. He was a whole other boy who happened to wear my brother's face. Dex was too different at Thanksgiving dinner, too formal, like he'd been possessed by royalty, talking in depth about his classes and that he was the top-ranked student. That wasn't Dex. I knew it wasn't my brother, because Dex hated being categorized. He also hated Harvard. Dream school my ass. He could barely focus in school, his teachers insisting on him being screened for ADHD, which Dad refused. Because in Dad's eyes, we had to be perfect. I jokingly commented that Dex didn't even graduate high school, just to shut him up, and Dad almost choked on a mouthful of turkey. Mom pursed her lips around the rim of her wine glass. Dex hadn't spoken to me since, completely under our father's spell. When we were kids, my brother left me little notes to reassure me that I was going to be okay. He'd hide them in sofa creases and slip them under my door. Except when I searched his room, there was nothing, only the ghost of who Dex used to be. His application for a drama school in New York was still on his dresser, crumpled under old movie posters and textbooks, covered in coffee stains. He'd only written his name. I laughed at that. That was Dexter, distracted by everything. It was 2 a.m. when Dad pulled me out of bed. Huh! Wiping sleep from my eyes, I blinked at him, confused. "Get in the car," Dad told me. "We're going out." I didn't like the idea of going out at 2 a.m., but sure, a father-daughter car ride sounded fun. Sliding onto cool leather seats, hesitantly, I was still wrapped in my blanket, still sleepy, my head pressed against the car window. It was freezing cold, I was shivering. When I was a little more awake, my mind drifting into fruition, a father-daughter car ride was sounding progressively less appealing. I noticed Dad was driving us out of town, which was out of character. Dad hated going out of town. I couldn't help it, a shiver of panic slipping down my spine. I could feel my heart start to skip in my chest, my stomach twisting into uncomfortable knots. "Where are we going?" He didn't reply, cranking the radio up, which left me to stew in the silence, and the sound of my heart pounding faster. Pressing my face against the glass, I blinked at the long, winding road, blanketed oblivion in front of me. We were in the middle of rural Virginia, and my phone was dead, so I couldn't even text Mom. I did have several locations in my head, though neither of them justified 2 a.m. Couldn't Dad have waited until morning? The thought suddenly struck me. Was Grandpa sick? The more I thought about it, the sicker I started to feel. I hated the dark, and it was the kind of dark that felt almost empty, hollow, like there was no ending and the road would continue forever. The dark has always felt suffocating to me, and being enveloped in pitch-black open oblivion, I had a sudden, overwhelming urge to jump out of the car. There were no streetlights, and the further away we were driving from home, from safety, panic was starting to choke my throat. I couldn't breathe. Suddenly, clasping my hands in my lap, "Dad," I said, my voice a sharp whisper I couldn't help. "Where are you taking me?" When Dad didn't answer, only stepping on the gas, I kicked his seat. "Dad!" Dad's fingers tightened around the wheel. "Shopping," was his only response. "Shopping?" My mind whirred with questions. At 2 a.m.? When I leaned back in my seat, my hands delving between the gaps by habit, I pulled out a folded piece of card. I thought it was trash, but peering at it, something was written in black ink. When a streetlight finally appeared, a sickly glow illuminating the note, I found myself staring at a single word written in my brother's old writing. Dex's handwriting had drastically changed. For example, on my recent birthday card, he signed his name in perfect calligraphy. But I knew his old writing, his scrappy scribbles that were hard to read, which was exactly what I was staring at, and it was unmistakable, something I couldn't ignore, even when I tried to push down that panic, that drowning feeling starting to envelop me. "Run." My gaze flicked to the front. Luckily, Dad wasn't paying attention. "Shopping," I said shakily, my hand pawing for the lock on the door. My breaths were heavy, suddenly suffocated in my chest. I couldn't trust them. I maintained a smile, but I felt like I was fucking drowning. Dex's note grasped in my fist. Sliding across the seat, I tried the other door, also locked. "Yeah, shopping," Dad hummed. "We're out of milk, but there are no stores open." I managed to choke out. I was all too aware of the car slowing down, and I was already planning my escape. My mind felt choked and wrong, and there were so many questions. If Dex had been on this exact car ride, then what happened to him? Mike was my top suspect. If Dad's friend with connections could turn my brother into a stranger, then he could do anything to me. Weighing my options, I feverishly watched my father find a parking spot. I had to think straight. If I didn't, I was gonna end up like Dex. I had a plan, sort of. If I dove over the front seat when my father wasn't looking, I would be able to get away. I had no plan for after that. I was just focusing on getting out of the car. However, when I was ready to leap over the seat, Dad stopped the car and jumped out. I tried to shuffle back, tried to inch toward the left door, but Dad was already grasping my arm and pulling me out of the car. In my panic, I dropped the note, stumbling out into cool air tickling my cheeks. The night should have felt like any other, and yet I was standing in the middle of nowhere. The sky above was too dark, and there were no stars. I was going to run before I glimpsed building loomed in the distance. The place reminded me of a warehouse or even a facility, a silver monolith cut off from the rest of the world. There was a lake nearby and nothing else. Dad grabbed my hand gently, though his grasp was firm, a subtle order to stay by his side. He flashed his ID card at a guard, pulling me towards automatic doors lit up in eerie white light. My panic twisted into confusion, relief washing over me like warm water. Dad was right. It was a shopping center. When we entered, and I found myself mesmerized by a labyrinth of aisles, we passed a section of canned food, and then snacks and medical supplies. Studying each aisle, I was in awe. Survival equipment, diapers, and a whole aisle dedicated to college textbooks. What was this place? It was like a super Costco. When I reached for a cart, Dad kept pulling me further down each aisle, and the deeper I was dragged into this place, what was being sold started to contort in my vision, like I was in a nightmare. The lights above started to dim, the goods being sold twisting into things I didn't want to see. Stomach lining in vacuum packaging, and then a raccoon skeleton. I was comforted by a section of whipping cream and baking soda before we turned a corner, a sudden blur of twisted red slamming into me. It was all I could see, stretched straight down the aisle. I thought it was fish at first, fresh fish being sold early. Except each bulging mass of red my father and I passed was unmistakably human. Dad? I rasped, glimpsing a human heart sitting on display, encased in ice. What is this place? I started to back away, but I couldn't stop staring. I found myself in a trance, following my father. It was like stepping into an emergency ward. I had been there once and never again. I hated blood, and it was everywhere, smearing the floor and shelves. I don't know if I was in shock, before reality started to hit me in what felt like electroshocks. There were body parts for sale, both dead and alive, human brains both separate, and being sold with their bodies. People. Normal people put on display, their skin marked with red pen highlighting specific parts of them. I saw women, their faces circled and marked with different prices. Men, covered in brightly colored tags advertising features. Coming to a halt, my body wouldn't move. I couldn't fucking breathe. Lily. Dad pulled me in front of one sign in particular. Intelligence, 17 to 25. I saw others. Intelligence, 25 to 30 intelligence. 30 to 40, the advertisement showed a group of smiling teenagers mid-laugh. Underneath, give your children the greatest gift ever. I should have been glued to it, trying to figure out what intelligence meant, except my gaze wasn't on the sign, or even my father already forking out cash. I was dizzily aware I was taking steps back, but I couldn't bring myself to move, to twist around and run. We were too deep into the store, and the exit was so far away, a labyrinth I knew I wouldn't be able to get through without my legs giving way. The store owner greeted my father, and I had to breathe deeply to stay afloat. Dad introduced himself as a friend of Mike, though his voice didn't feel real, drifting in and out of reality. The display said intelligence, but that didn't make sense. A guy stood in front of me, with blondish brown hair and wide, dilated pupils. He was dressed in a simple white shirt and shorts, looking almost high. Despite his eerie grin, I noticed he was trembling, his hands pinned behind his back. He stood perfectly straight, chin up, eyes forward, like a puppet on strings. It wasn't until my eyes found his forehead, where his IQ had been written in permanent marker, that I realized what the store was advertising. Then I found the subtle tube stuck into the back of his hand. Drugged. Ben is our smartest, the man gushed, like he was selling a car. He was donated a few weeks ago. Apparently, he tried to kill himself. Who would have thought, right? A smart kid like that trying to end it. Anyway, he's been fully checked. The kid graduated early, attended Cambridge University in England, only to move back home and attempted on Christmas Eve. The stall owner's voice slammed into me like waves of ice water, and I remembered Dex's sudden change in personality, like he was a different person. Something warm slithered up my throat, and I slapped my hand over my mouth. I couldn't take my eyes off of the intelligence being paraded in front of me. This 19-year-old boy with a crooked smile, freckles speckling his cheeks. This kid who had a life, a family and friends, and a reason why he chose to die. Reduced to an empty shell with a high IQ. The owner gestured to the kid, who didn't even blink, didn't dare make eye contact with me. No, I said, and then I said it louder, twisting around. I needed to get away. I needed to run. There were 3 guards in front of me. Following the store owner's order to restrain me, they did, hesitant when my father barked at them not to hurt me. I can assure you, your daughter will have a sparkling career. The stall owner was smiling widely, and I screamed, struggling violently. I'll take him, Dad said, unfazed by my cries. How much is he? $9.50, the man said. Since my wife has done business with you before, consider it a discount. He turned to the boy with a laugh. Ben is a good boy, so the process should take about 3 hours. Usually, after the removal, the brain can go into shock and sometimes shut down due to trauma. It may take weeks, or even months, for it to fully settle into its new body. His smile widened, and I heaved up my meager dinner, spewing all over the guard. When I screamed, my cries were muffled, suffocated. I felt like I was choking. I was gonna fucking die. I have to get out of here. My thoughts were paralyzed, fight or flight sending my body into a manic frenzy. I wanted to find comfort in the boy on sale, but he kept smiling, wider and wider, oblivious he was standing in a slaughterhouse. Ben didn't fight back when another guard grabbed him. Instead, he was like a doll cut from his puppet strings, limp and unresponsive. The man ripped the price tag off Ben's cheek, and he didn't even flinch. It's your lucky day, boy, the guard chuckled. You're finally getting a body. Ben just smiled, swaying to the left, almost losing his balance. The store owner was still speaking, and I took the opportunity to headbutt a guard. He let go instantly, but I dropped to my knees, disoriented. I was free, but I didn't know where to go. Everything was blurry, twisted, and contorted red. Run! Was all I could shriek at Ben, who didn't even blink. He can't hear you. The store owner laughed, like it was funny, like he was telling a fucking joke. Intelligence is shipped to us directly from conversion. All nice and packaged for sale. Everything else is gone, kid. You're talking to a blank slate. When I was yanked to my feet again, I felt numb. However, the owner rolled his eyes. Like I said, Ben wanted to die. He chuckled. I'm confident he won't fight back. They usually don't, but if he does, you're free to return him within 30 days, just like all our products. Oh, and don't worry, the mind has been wiped of personality. Only his IQ and achievements remain. The core identity is removed during the conversion to avoid. Let's call them complications. Complications. Dad's tone darkened. Like what? Oh, it's nothing to worry about. We have had instances of what we call revival, which is essentially, the store owner was stumbling over his words. Well, what happens when you factory reset your iPhone? It erases everything, Dad said. The man nodded. Yes, However, in some rare instances, fragments can be left behind. In the case of the human brain, memories can cling on, and in rare occurrences, so can consciousness. Mr. Charlotte, I'm not saying it will happen, but if you have any problems, feel free to bring him back and we will provide a full refund. Dad nodded slowly. Then I'll take him. I stopped breathing, my body going still. Was this really happening? Was I going to die? Dad? I whispered, when my father cupped my cheeks and told me to be brave. He told me I was his strong little girl. I did try. I fucking tried to nod, like I was accepting it, before clawing his eyes out. I tried to use soothing tones, but they weren't working. I resorted to screaming at him. I told him he was dead to me, that he was a psychopath. I really thought it might wake him up, make him realize that I was his daughter. I wasn't a caricature of what a successful daughter should be. I was his fucking daughter. Dad. Except he didn't listen, his hands tightening on my shoulders. You want to be smarter? Don't you, Lily? No! An animalistic shriek ripped from my throat. Yes, you do. He smiled through gritted teeth. I'm going to make you smarter, all right? Just like your brother, sweetie. I tried to attack him, screeching like a wild animal. I did try to run, biting down on a guard's hand. But it was my father pulling me back which brought reality crashing down. I was going to die. I stopped trying to get away, stopped crying, when I was picked up and thrown over a guard's shoulder. I remember being pinned down on an ice-cold surface, a cruel prick in my neck numbing my limbs, and silver blades whirring above me. My arms and legs were restrained, my forehead marked with a cold red pen that tickled. I laughed, but my laughter exploded into hysterical sobs. Figures in blue scrubs surrounded me in a blur. They poked and prodded me, their voices collapsing into incomprehensible white noise. I slept for a while, dazed from the drugs feeding into my arms. I wasn't even aware of a cannula being forced into my wrist. The sound of a saw startled my numb thoughts, and I twisted my head, eyes flickering, lips trying to form words. I remember everything was slow, like I had been forced into slow motion. The back of my head had been shaved, and all of my hair was gone. The ice-cold surface of the surgical table made me shiver. When the sound of the saw became unbearable, I gave up and forced myself to squint through a curtain of filthy plastic. There was a bed next to mine, pooling red seeping across the floor, a limp arm hanging over the edge. The hand was still moving, still clenching into a fist, like they could feel it, every cruel cut ripping them apart. I wondered who the boy was. I wondered what his life was like, and why he chose to end it. Why did you want to die, Ben? I squeezed my eyes shut as the saw continued, but morbid curiosity forced them open. I watched numb, as blood pooled and ran black across the pristine white tiles, trickling through the gaps. There was so much of it. Ben, who never had a voice to scream with, who had already been wiped away long before his brain was on sale. I could hear him being cut apart, and the sound drove me to the brink, teetering, and wanting to end it right there before a blade could slice into my skull. I tried to bite my tongue off. I tried to smash my head against the bed. But still, the saw grew louder, and I could sense it getting closer. 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 When the boy's hand finally went limp, I desperately tried to free myself from the table, but I was brutally restrained, my arms and legs tightly bound. The saw stopped, and a cleaner rushed in to deal with the blood. I could sense the figures in scrubs murmuring excitedly. They had exactly what they wanted, what my dad had bought him for. Vomit clung to my mouth, dripping down my chin. When I opened my eyes again, what was left of Ben was being wheeled away, leaving me alone in the cold, sterile room. For a brief moment, I found myself drowning in silence. Silence. It gave me hope. Maybe Dad had a change of heart. But then the screeching started up again. Wait, the word didn't make it to my lips. Instead, my body just froze, paralyzed. Miss Charlotte, can you count down to 10, please? The voice in my ear was a low murmur, a woman's voice with a hint of empathy. 1. I whispered over the whirring blades growing closer. 2, 3, 4. I heaved in a breath, sobbing. 5, 6, 7. The world went dark suddenly, and I panicked. 8. The saw had stopped and I was falling, just like Alice down the rabbit hole. But this was deeper than a rabbit hole. I don't think this darkness had an ending or a bottom. 9. I whispered. My words felt wrong and void. 10. When I opened my eyes, the scene in front of me had shifted. I was no longer restrained, but lying comfortably on a soft bed. The sterile room was gone, replaced by the warm light of morning filtering through a window. My father was smiling at me. Lily! He hugged me and I hugged him back. Sweetie, you look beautiful. I took my father's hand. The bandages around my head felt itchy and uncomfortable, but I kept smiling as I walked into the morning sunlight that burned my face. I hadn't felt the sun on my face in so long. It was perfect. When my father took me home, I entered the kitchen with the intention of finding a bone saw, just like the one used to kill me. The sharpest thing I could find was a butcher knife. I sliced up that bastard when he was curled up in bed. I started with his head, hacking it off when he was half awake, half conscious. He should have been fully awake like you were, Lily. He should have been able to feel everything. I'm glad your mom was out, because then I'd have to kill her too. I'm sorry I took your body, Lily. And for the record, I didn't want to die. I was kidnapped and sold overseas by my psycho university professor. Fucking asshole. I didn't jump off a bridge on Christmas Eve either. I spent that night hiding from him and his goons trying to hunt me down. I was pushed off the bridge. They faked my death and shipped me here. Apparently, some billionaire fuck wanted my brain for his daughter, but he pulled out of the deal, so I ended up in the bargain bin with all of the left behinds. It's the story they tell all of their customers so they feel better about murdering us. Oh no, don't worry. This one wanted to die, so he's completely fine. Fuck. I'm sorry I took your body, Lily. I'm sorry your dad is a piece of shit. And I'm sorry I burned your house to the ground. You didn't answer me for a while. I think you're still in shock. Your voice is soothing, and it feels comfortable. Like we're one. You're getting louder, and if I concentrate, it almost feels like I can feel your breath tickling my ear. It's okay, Ben. Your response almost feels like a goodbye. I hope it isn't. I'm sorry my dad has connections.